welcome back to Canuck of the Dead. I've been waiting for this interview because this composer that I'm bringing on today, I absolutely adore the music that he's done, and especially some of the horror stuff, which we're going to dig into a little bit. So without further ado, Adrian Ellis, how you doing?
Awesome, man. Thanks for having me. I'm really glad to be here.
Oh, no, absolutely. You are a very busy man, aren't you?
Yeah, it's been that way, happily and ironically and happily so. Yeah.
It's always fun because I do some work with Blood in the Snow, and when you get the lineup for Blood in the Snow, it's like, how many Adrian movies are there?
Right.
Because yeah, you feature shorts, like you're all over the place.
Yeah. I'm very blessed in that sense for sure.
Now, with a lot of this stuff, is this people coming to you, or are you looking for work, or?
No, it's actually it's a big happy family, it turns out. So oftentimes, because there's some stuff floating out there, people sort of see what I've done and they might reach out from that. But more than often, it's just connections, like friends of friends or people that reach out to a filmmaker I've worked with and they're like, we want to get in touch with Adrian and how can we work with him and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's a nice it's just friends making more friends, and the family just keeps getting bigger and bigger.
And that's the best kind of advertising.
Absolutely, yeah.
Now, we might as well bring this up right at the start because if there's any fellow composers out there listening, Adrian has his own podcast out there.
That's right. It's called the Screen Composers Studio. And I think actually with the horror thing in mind, the incredible Mark Corvin features on, I believe, episodes number 2 of season 1. Of course, he's done The Lighthouse and The Witch and now Black Phone with Ethan Hawke. And he's just a fantastic composer with so many really cool ideas about how to approach horror movie music. And just everything he's done is so cool. So yeah, I have a good chat with Mark. But yeah, check it out. Screen Composer Studio, wherever you find your podcasts. And I just dig in with composers. Super fun.
When do you find time to do podcasts?
You know what it is? I have a tough time saying no. And something, this was actually a pandemic idea. We with the Screen Composers Guild, which I am currently the chair of. We were just trying to think of I was thinking what can we do during the pandemic that sort of bring people together and that we can do at a distance. And of course, many of these things are done as we're doing it right now on Zoom or by streaming. And it just made sense. And it was a great opportunity for me to be able to connect with all these incredible, amazing talents and people I'd never thought I'd get to chat to and have these conversations.
That is excellent. So remember, Screen Composers Studio on podcast servers everywhere.
Everywhere, yeah.
Check it out. Now, one of the ones I definitely wanted to chat with you about was you're composing on Gavin Michael Booth's The Scarehouse.
Yeah.
I've watched that behind the scenes featurette, and it just not baffled. It's intriguing how you use so much of that building. Can you explain a bit about that?
Well, with Gavin and I, the thing has been for a long time, and I think we started working together maybe 2012, 2013 on a short film of his. And I don't know if that's where my interest in really getting conceptual each time out started, or if it was a bit before that. I think it was sort of a mixed bag. But wherever Gavin and I work together, and I think we've done almost a dozen features or a dozen shorts and a bunch of features together, it's always a challenge. It's like, how can we do something really crazy this time out? How can we sort of push the envelope, go a little bit further than we did before, and surprise ourselves? And for me, it's always interesting to sort of find a way into the film and to really dig into what the material is. I like to read scripts. I like to look at the early rushes, whatever you can give me, even if it's concept art or anything else, and just go what is the heart of this thing, or what is something that just sort of stands out. And when Gavin told me that they were shooting in an actual haunted attraction in Windsor, I was like, oh, that's interesting. Then he sent me a bunch of shots, stills of the actual Knights of Columbus building, or former Knights of Columbus building they were shooting in. And I just saw all the stuff that was in there. And of course, my mind immediately goes to, what does that sound like? What is that stuff like? What's the sound that thing could make? They had a big, giant, literal a pool, like a swimming pool in the basement. I'm like, that's amazing, reverberant space. Could totally use that. They had chain link fences, an old clawfoot bathtub. These incredible massive film reels when they used to actually mount film 35 mil film onto these things, and one of these old mailbox systems. It's just so much stuff. And I said to him, I think I need to come down here and just have some give me 3 days on the set to just record this stuff. I don't know if it's going to work. I don't know if it'll fit into the movie, but let me have at her. So I took the train down to Windsor, and I think I spent about 2 days on that set. They'd switched to overnight shoots because there was construction going on during the day. So I had full run of the place during the day by myself. I was literally the only person in that building, and it had like old trash in it. It smelled so bad. It was like a 37-degree summer.
Oh,
It was
wow.
really horrible, horrible working conditions. And it was super creepy being in this like haunted, even though all the lights are on, like you turn a corner and there'd be like a clown or like a weird mannequin that was all like splattered up, or and it was just like the dark spaces where you had to like figure out how to get through a little corridor before the next light came on, right? And just being down there making creepy sounds by myself was a really weird and creepy experience. There would be so many times when I'd be like doing something, I'd look over my shoulder like, oh, was there something there? No, okay, I'm good.
Okay, yeah, that would mess with me too.
Yeah.
So, did that give inspiration then, being down there as well? Like, not just the sounds and the noises and the environment, but well, I guess the environment, did that help?
Oh, 100%. Like, I mean, it's whatever you can get your hands onto that sort of immerse yourself into anything that you're doing, is inspiring for sure. And I just felt like being there, I sort of really like when I saw the final footage or the cuts, I felt I know what this space is like. I know what they were sort of experiencing. I know what the actors and their characterizations were all about, and what that kind of claustrophobia and the kind of eeriness of that space, like the kind of sort of insanity that would produce. So yeah, I totally got into it. And of course, once the two our two fields, like the actors, like at the end of my day I would sort of hang around and hang out on set, and I did get some time with the actors as well, um and got some of them to like do these incredible vocalizations in that pool room that I used as well, right? And just have them sort of run these crazy experiments. I just sort of came up with stuff off the top of my head, and they were really game because actors do all these sort of like yes and kind of things where they're just like they're always interested in some new experiment. So like be the animal version of yourself, and what would that sound like if you were vocalizing that, or like just express the anger that your character feels during this movie and just like scream and rage into this pool area. And they just had so much fun with it, and that stuff, I mean, it was just all gold.
That's awesome. And if you want to see some of this behind the scenes footage, get the Blu-ray of the Scarehouse, and there is a behind the scenes featurette all about that. And it's so much fun to watch. It is. So then you've gone into other horror things as well, haven't you?
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that comes up. I have a very diverse career, which I'm really happy about because I think everything feeds into everything else. Like I might be doing something very light and very happy at one moment, and then the next I'm into the darkest of dark. And I feel like those two extremes really help push on either side of those things. Like you never kind of getting bored or reaching too much into the same toolkit over and over again because you're so fresh. Once you get back into it, you're like, oh yeah, I want to get into this.
That's got to be good because that way you're not always on the same thing all the time.
100%.
Now, one of the things that you had mentioned to me was, I guess right now on Shutter, called The Strings.
Yeah.
What about, can give us a bit about that, please?
So the really cool thing about this, it's an indie Canadian feature that's a Shutter original now, I think. And the story surrounds this singer-songwriter who is sort of on the outs on some relationships and just sort of like in a very bad spot in her life. And she decides to take off and go to a remote cabin by herself on the East Coast and finish her album. So there's a real like music centric kind of like concept to the whole film already. While she's there, and it's sort of she's sort of looking into string theory, and she starts to have these very like weird dissonant sort of experiences where the veil between the two realms as it works sort of starts to blur a bit, and things get really extreme. This idea of the human voice, this idea of this person all alone, and she's a singer as well, just intrigued me. And I thought, that's a really cool way in, this idea that we could get really intimate with this character and we could use her as well as her voice in the actual score. So the concept was kind of originally like, what can we do if we did this just with the human voice? Like what kind of things, how far could we push that as a concept? So of course you've got this idea of like just the solo, her voice all alone in a space that's very intimate, it's very lonely, it's very separated from everything. So that's a cool aspect of it. But then we took it even further, and we ended up recording with a 16-piece choir in Toronto. And some of that stuff was kind of tonal. It was sort of like telling a story. There's a little bit of a romantic element to the film, but really what it was about for me was getting 16 people in a room and going, what if I just, again, these experiments, right? Like just throwing ideas at them and saying, what happens if, and then seeing how far they could take it. And it was just like, there were moments where I got chills just like listening to what they were coming up with, and just they're having fun with it. It was so funny because like when you listen to the film, it's really intense. It's very eerie. It's very like, yeah, it reaches these high dynamic levels. But what would happen during the recording sessions is they would sing some crazy thing that was so unusual for them, because they're more like used to doing Bach chorales and that kind of thing. And then they would do this crazy thing. It would sound so nasty and gnarly, and then they'd burst into laughter right after they did the take, And actually, that some of that laughter also made it into the score, because of course you manipulate it, you process that, you pitch it down, and then it becomes really creepy on its own. So I always think there's no wasted material. There's always something for everything to live.
That is crazy. And I was just looking, and I forgot that you did some of my favorite shorts that I've seen over the years at Blood in the Snow too.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Time Box, you were a part of that.
Right.
And my absolute favorite, Siren.
Oh yeah.
With Selah as the model that gets bit.
Yep.
By something and then turns into a real mermaid.
Yeah, that was a fun one for sure.
I gotta ask, how do you figure out a score for a woman turning into a mermaid? Like what do you reach to for inspiration on that?
Ironically, given what we just talked about, it's very similar. What is a siren? A siren is a creature whose musical voice is the call to destruction. She's drawing you in. There's a kind of hypnotism. There's a kind of like, I don't know, some sort of dark magic that's involved with that, right? Like calling sailors to their death. And I think that was what, they were playing with in that film. This idea that you've got this thing that is an object of horror, a character of pure horror, but you are unable to resist drawing nearer and nearer. And so if I recall, like, and this is a while back, I haven't actually listened to that score in a while, but it really was about the voice again, like that call, that single solo female voice. I think the idea behind it too was, on the flip side, again, there's always, I think the best horror always has like the sort of front facing, like this is terrifying, but then a kind of message underneath. And I think part of what that message was the idea of women's power, right? Like the idea that a single woman can have this incredible power, and it can be really terrifying and violent if it needs to be, right? And I think that's part of sort of the messaging within that film. So again, having that solo human voice was a really important part of that.
Excellent. And then one of the other films I didn't realize you were part of, and I apologize for that, was Dead Sight.
Right. Yes. Another that's cult hero. The Cooks and the Collinses, Jesse and Liv. They're wonderful longtime collaborators now, and that was a great joy to work on that one.
Because it was intriguing, because it's about a blind man fighting zombies.
Right. Yeah.
Which I can safely say I don't think I've ever seen a film like that before.
Yeah, it really puts you into it. I imagine if the end of the world comes, some sort of apocalypse, and not only do you have to deal with that, but you are also unable to see. And it's interesting because so much of horror is about the sound, right? Like you get frightened because I think there's some ancient programming in us that just focuses more on sound than sight when we're trying to figure out what's wrong. And our hearing actually goes like 360 around us. We can hear behind us. Our ears are able to triangulate where a sound is coming from. We don't have eyes like other animals that are on the sides of our head, so we can see behind us. So we really rely on our hearing to be able to tell us where the danger is. And I think that's what music and sound design and horror really plays with, is this idea that, you are trying to desperately figure out where the danger is. And because the screen is front facing, it's coming from somewhere that you're not going to see right away.
Exactly. And then the last one I'm going to touch on, because again, we actually had Ryan LaPlante on here earlier.
Oh, great. Yeah. Amazing.
And Holy Hell.
What a total blast.
I was going to say, that must have been so much fun to work on.
It was just bananas. There's something about horror films that, you just get to take the shackles off in some ways, right? Like it's just, and then when you get into that kind of filmmaking where you're just like, this film is just, it's so crazy, right? Like on paper, it just looks like madness, like it could have been made. And so, that was another one where we had a lot of fun sort of coming out with like, what's the concept behind this? And for me, it was really like, I thought of Clint Eastwood. I thought of The Unforgiven. I thought about this avenging angel, like this person that needs to dig deep into themselves and just come out with the most violent answer to the situation that they're in. And so for me, a kind of Western based score where it's like guitar, like twangy guitar, like recalling Ennio Morricone, and then trying to go a little bit in a different direction. And then this sort of like wacky, crappy, almost John Carpenter-ish synthy weirdness that was carnival-y, for the family, that these mad people. And just injecting some fun into it. I know he was working with some other people before I came on board, and I think part of the problem was that they just didn't see that this was actually a very funny film. They didn't get the humor, so they just made everything dark and heavy and really aggressive. And I was like, no, this is deeply funny. Like, this is hilarious. And that's the other joy of horror in a lot of cases is, you can have films that just drag you through the trenches, but then a lot of it is just being able to sit and like get scared or repulsed, but then also just laugh your ass off with a bunch of other people in the theater.
Yeah, it's hard to take that movie serious. Like,
oh my God, you can't.
No.
Yeah, it's just over the top zany, and it's just a total riot.
Now, you did mention one other film that's on the circuit right now, and I guess Fantasia, which I'm not sure when this will come out, but we're recording this mid-July, and Fantasia is going on right now.
Yeah,
it's sold out, and that is Cult Hero.
Cult Hero, yeah, another absolutely, it's bonkers. It's funny. You're just like lining these things up perfectly, because this again relates to Holy Hell in the sense that it is an exploitation film of a sort. It does have that callback, in this case more to the 80s, with a kind of washed up cult hero that's trying to help a Karen kind of woman extract her husband from a really loopy cult. And again, it's like just the total like fun of like just jumping, right? There are moments when it's like truly aggressive and terrifying, and then there are moments where it's just absolutely bananas, off the charts, goofy and fun. And to bounce around between that and recall the 80s and kind of do a little bit of 80s retro stuff. And for me as a guitarist, being able to rip out some like wacky solos every once in a while was really fun too.
Well, the poster screams 80s, like we were saying before. That's so a Drew Struzan poster right there.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's gorgeous. It's a thing of beauty.
Oh, man. So then what's it like going from horror to these other genres? Because like I said, it's nice to be able to bounce around, but how hard is it to be able to switch?
Oh, it's not hard at all. It's like, when you go for a tasting or something like that, or if you're like trying to like reposition yourself in some way, it's nice to have like a neutral moment and then get into something else. And it just, the contrast between those two things shows you, it sort of outlines what's different and outlines the sort of opportunities for me anyways. So, it's sometimes it's a relief, like especially something really dark. I'm shut alone in the studio all day long, like 8 hours a day, it's this constant thing. So if you're in a movie and you're really in it and you're really invested in it, it can become very intense, right? I'm sure it's the same with editing or anything else. You don't have those moments of levity. I don't have like, in between takes, I'm making jokes with the actors next to me or whatever. It's just, I'm in it and you really feel it to your core at a cellular level. So it can be a real relief to just do something that's light. And then you get sick of that. I'm often doing movies about Christmas in the middle of July, which just feels completely bizarre. So then it's nice to slam into something really heavy and dark to sort of as a palate cleanser.
Well, that's why I was wondering if you're into this heavy, dark movie and suddenly you get like, my buddy's film, Very Corgi Christmas, and you now have to turn off that darkness. Is it not hard at first?
No, I really don't think so. For me, I mean, I know some actors are like this, that they get into it and they can't separate themselves. I mean, I think for creative people, this is like, I think the approach that I have to this is something I try to apply to my life as well, because for anybody who's creative, one of the toughest things is to separate yourself from this ideal of who you are as a thing. Like I say, I am a composer, but I'm much more than that. I'm all these things. And if I only see myself as a composer, then I'm like really in danger of like falling into some real dark depression if my career's not going the way I want it to, or if I'm not reaching the goals that I'm trying to reach. So I think that separation, like being able to be really in it and then take yourself out, like I'm sure like there's some of the best actors are able to like inhabit a character and then walk away from it and be able to detach in order to maintain a kind of healthy professional relationship with that, And on the other hand, some people ask me like, how do you like, you have to like, I mean, at the end of this year, I'll have done 5 feature films and 5 factual series and a handful of, short films and a video game in between, plus the podcast and everything else. And so it's a lot of work. And they ask me like, how do you come up with that much material? And I say, well, it's like, as a professional, you don't have a choice. You can't wait for inspiration. You just have to have a toolbox, and you go to that toolbox and you work with something. And you go, yes, this is the thing. And it's like a muscle. You just got to work it up. And I think just like working out, there you do a set and then you take a break and you let the muscles relax. And then you have an off day. You don't do your legs and then blast your legs again and then blast your legs again. You'd like take a break and let that recovery happen. And I think it's the same thing for creative stuff. You have to have that recovery.
Yeah, because otherwise you would turn into where your love is now your hate because you have to do it every day.
Yeah, or it's burnout. And I think that's the most dangerous thing. Even if you love it, I mean, I've certainly experienced burnout many times, and it's not even that I don't want to do the thing anymore. It's just you hit a wall, and it's very bad on every level.
Mhm. Well, now then, let me ask you for the future, because you had mentioned earlier you and Gavin get together and you guys like to push things.
Yeah.
With your last feature film,
Yes.
okay, I
Yeah.
don't see where you guys can push it much more. The
Right.
last film you did was Last Call. Gavin did a 2-shot, well, I guess it's a single shot, but 2 people,
Yeah.
87 minutes.
Yeah.
Then went down to Windsor and recorded the score in 1 take.
Yeah.
How do you go beyond that? Like, how are you guys going to keep pushing yourselves?
We'll find something, I'm sure. I mean, the thing I say, because people ask the question like, or there's a kind of like, I think an underlying, maybe unspoken question that sometimes comes up when you talk about these kind of things is like, oh, is this just a gimmick? Are you guys just doing this for like, so people have something to talk about? And well, I mean, of course, that's a nice side effect too, right? You have a story to tell about how you're working. But for me, really, it always has to tie into the movie. It has to be deeply integrated, and there has to be a reason for doing it that way. So with Last Call, I mean, this is a movie about deeply broken people who are experiencing extraordinary strain and stress and strife and misery in their lives. And they're coming together and they're finding the humanity that they share in this, two shots, 2 cameras, but one single unbroken shot. There's no hidden edits. It's absolutely 100% pure. And so for me, like to have the musicians experience the same thing essentially that the actors did in making the film is that they have to go top to tail. They have to experience every single cue from beginning to end without a retake. And if you make a mistake, that's it. That's baked in, right? I mean, we did do more than 1 take, just like they shot it more than 1 time, but they chose one. And for me, that kind of like that kind of pressure, or just that tight wire act, right? When you're walking a tightrope, that creates a different kind of dynamic when you're playing. Like you really just lean in a bit more to what you're doing, and it shows I think it shows. And also the mistakes are there. I mean, if you listen to the score really carefully, there's tons of mistakes in it. It's not a perfect, clean, glitzy, shiny, perfectly polished score. It's got lots of mistakes in it, or like, it's just human. And that's the perfect accompaniment to that film. So whatever Gavin and I come up with next, and I'm sure we'll figure out something. I mean, I don't think it's not like it has to be more every time and we have to break a record or do something crazy, because if it doesn't make sense for the film, we won't do it. But I'm sure it's going to be something. It's going to be something.
Yeah, I'm scared. Okay, I've watched Gavin grow and I'm scared. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, everybody out there, stick around because we're going to find out what Adrian has to do with secret Nazi expeditions when we come back.